Good morning. It is Wednesday, May 20th. We're so excited to be here for our short story discussion of Burning Girls and Other Stories with the author, Veronica Schanoes. So, Veronica, I am going to spotlight you so everybody can see you. Oh, more people are coming in.
Yeah, we're coming.
Yeah. Are there more people in the parking lot?
No, but the rabbi walked in at the same time, so I got a little way. Oh, good morning. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm tardy in school.
You are, right? Okay. All right. So I asked Veronica to start with telling us a little bit about herself, this book, where she's teaching, and then we'll get into your questions. And of course, you know that I have questions. So Veronica, please take it away.
Well, thank you. I just want to start by saying I'm so delighted and honored to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I'm just honored that you've given my book such careful, close attention. When you write, you never know if anyone who's not related to you is actually reading what you write. You hope, but you never know. So it's just really wonderful for me to be able to be here and see so many people who've found my book worth reading. So thank you so much.
And spend hours and hours discussing.
Yeah, I really am. As an English professor, it warms my heart. What can I say? Thank you. I am an English professor at Queens College at the City University of New York. And I mostly teach literary criticism there, but they're finally starting to edge me into creative writing as well. As an academic, I work on fairy tales and children's literature and fantasy. And you may have noticed as a fiction writer, I work on fairy tales and fantasy, less children's literature though. I wish I could, but I think it's harder than adult literature. So I guess I wrote these stories over a number of years. I started publishing in my late 20s and did not have enough. One thing after another kept happening. The book did not come out until, I guess, about 5 years ago when I was in my mid 40s. So it was a long time coming, this book for me. And I tried to only put in the stories that I felt proudest of rather than just everything I had done. And as I did, I noticed themes emerging among them, which I guess is true of any artist, right? Like I'm a big fan of Gene Kelly's, and you notice certain themes he keeps coming back to in his dances. Dancing with sort of everyday objects like the mop or the newspaper. And I keep coming back to certain themes I noticed in my stories as well. My most recent story is actually not in the book. It's on a website called Reactor Magazine or Reactor Mag. Used to be Tor.com, but that was a while ago. And the story is called Blackjack. And it's actually, to my mind, a more Jewish story than almost any of the stories in Burning Girls, because it works almost entirely with fantasy derived from Jewish tradition. And it's about a grandmother in 1962 who is raising her grandchildren and takes a short vacation to Las Vegas, where she runs into the ghost of her ne'er-do-well ex-husband, her first husband. It's very strongly based in my family history, rather. And I really liked writing it because I think there are so few stories that center around older women. One of the stories in Burning Girls, the Emma Goldman story, is also, oh, thank you so much, Vanessa, is also...
For those in the room, I put up the link to Blackjack, and when I send you the recording, I'll put the link in that email, like I do everything else, all the things that I expect you to do.
Thank you. And so that's the direction I'm heading in, more and more into sort of Jewish-derived magic and wonder tales. Although not only there, I have also other ideas that are more based in Gentile fantasy. And I guess I'm open to answering any questions anybody has. I want to have the bulk of the time for that.
Okay. Who wants to start? Oh, I'm super surprised it's Lynn. Lynn!
I was an English teacher for over 35 years, so I loved delving into your book. It is filled with so much symbolism and metaphors and similes and all kinds of thematic importance. But I have I'm starting with one question, and that is the order of the stories in the book. As we were talking about each story, I felt there was an evolution of the first person. And then it would backtrack a little bit. And so we were a little confused about where she was in her evolution. Did you mean to have a particular order of the stories, or was that random?
A little of both. I definitely there were some sort of general wisdom ideas about stories that I followed. They say start strong, end long. So I ended with the longest and started with one of the ones I thought was the most affecting or most intense. And then I tried to make transitions somewhat smooth. I tried to group certain themes together. So 4, 5, 6, Phosphorus, Ballroom Blitz, and Serpents, you have this sort of punk rock interlude. And then Emma Goldman comes in the middle, which I like because actually it was one of the last stories I wrote for the collection. Emma Goldman and The Revenant I wrote specifically for the collection. So they are actually the latest stories in the book. And then aside from that, I left most of it to the editor because I just wasn't sure. I felt sort of overwhelmed by choice. There were a lot of stories and it felt like a lot of moving parts to me. So a little of both, I guess, is my answer.
And the reason I ask is because I'm not sure many agreed with me. I don't know how much of this is autobiographical and how much is not, but it seemed as if this central character, or was there a central character? I mean, was there an I? I was a little confused on the narrative point of view and whether that was a persona or whether it was you, whether it was the character. Can you clarify that a little bit?
Sure. It's usually me. I always say I don't have quite enough imagination to construct a separate authorial persona. It's usually me. In Emma Goldman, it's definitely me. In How to Bring Someone Back from the Dead, it is also definitely me. In some of the other stories, it gets a little trickier. Some of the ones where there isn't in Lost in the Supermarket, it's sort of an imagined version of me when I was younger. So a lot of them are, if they're not me, they are versions of me or the way I wanted to be or imagined myself being at different times in my life.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Alice, and then Judy.
Yeah, thank you, Veronica, for joining us today. My question is based on something you just said, where you referred to fairy tales not as children's literature. I'd like for you to expand. I mean, because I think most of us grew up with these stories. I can understand how adults can relate to them, but I'm just curious in terms of why you consider that adult literature.
I guess I consider it not exclusively children's literature. That the farther back you go in fairy tales, the less division there is between what's for adults and what's for children. So some of the earliest European literary versions of fairy tales we have are from 1555 to 1634 Italy. And they're full of talk about sex. They're very, very violent. They don't assume a division, if that makes sense. I don't think they excluded children from their readership or audience, but I don't think they felt that children were their only readership or audience. And even when you get to the Grimms, in the original version of Rapunzel that they collected, the witch finds out that Rapunzel's been seeing the prince because Rapunzel's clothing no longer fits her. Her girdle no longer fastens. And she doesn't understand why. And of course, the witch realizes she's pregnant. As the Grimms, that was in, I guess, their first edition, 18-ish. And as the Grimms revised their stories to make them more appropriate for children, what they did was take out a lot of the sexual references and add in a lot of Christian references. So Rapunzel instead asks the witch in later editions, how come it's so easy to pull the prince up the tower and so hard to pull you up the tower, which A, makes her stupid rather than just, a girl who's been kept sheltered and ignorant. It makes her sort of just foolish. And B, doesn't make any logical sense to me, because surely a strapping young man weighs more than your average witch, your average older woman witch. I don't know, but I would assume.
Rich witches. Correct.
Thank you very much.
I want to, oh, Judy.
I want to ask you, are you hopeful or pessimistic about the future? I tried to decide. I tried to determine whether you were. Some of them ended more hopefully than others. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future?
I think it depends on the day you catch me, and I think that's reflected in the stories.
Like the rest of us, huh?
Yeah, like the rest, like everybody else. I feel awfully disheartened lately by a lot. And but I know I'm not pessimistic, because I have a friend who is truly pessimistic, and I think she's going a little bit overboard with it. So I know I must be somewhat optimistic, at least. If not optimistic, I still have hope. But I am truly dispirited by a lot of what's happened in the past year or two.
Yes, like the rest of us.
Here. Merle.
Veronica, we're so happy that you joined us today because we had so many questions and really good discussions about your stories. My question is, when you are combining the fairy tale with the social commentary, like which came first? Or did you have something you wanted to say regarding social commentary and then go look for the appropriate fairy tale? Because that was fascinating to me, how you blended those things.
That's a good.
Thank you. That's a great
question.
question. Usually the fairy tale came first, but I was raised in a very political household. My parents met in the New Left. They met in SDS, and I was raised in a very leftist political household. So I think the social commentary and political commentary is just how I approach the world. And so I guess my idea for Burning Girls did not start out with a whole lot of political commentary. It started out as me thinking somebody should set Rumpelstiltskin in the sweatshops in the turn of the century in New York's Lower East Side. And I thought at first I would make it a sort of jolly, happy, funny story. I started telling it from the point of view of the blonde miller's daughter character. And I've always been interested in New York City history. It is my home and my heart, and I love a lot of this history in it. But as I did more and more research, the story got darker and darker. And I found that I needed another character. I invented the older sister, who eventually became the narrator of the story. And the political commentary just sort of came out of me. So usually I found myself fascinated by the fairy tale, but the political or social commentary is sort of always in the background of my mind. It's always, I guess it's sort of the air I'm moving through.
I think I can say for us, we found it. It could have been written yesterday, and there's so much going on in the world that you touched on all that. I would like to ask, and this is not about the book, but about writing. Do the editors really edit you? This is a lovely book. It's under 400 pages. And I find with novels that 400, 500, 600 pages, like, where's the editor?
Mm-hmm. I have had the good fortune of working with really wonderful editors, especially Ellen Datlow, who's edited most of my short stories when they first appear, and edited this book. Sorry, excuse me. I'm picking up for my students. They think anything between two covers is a novel. Edited this book as well. And we've rarely clashed on anything. What I find the most helpful thing an editor can do is point over here and say, this isn't working for me. And sometimes an editor has a suggestion of how to fix it, but sometimes the actual solution is something they haven't thought of. But having a reader, a well-read, experienced reader who can say, this part isn't doing what you want it to, or you're running long here, or even the one story that Ellen and I did not agree with, I rearranged some things in it. I didn't even add or cut anything. I just rearranged some of the pieces. It's actually The Revenant, which you'll be talking about next time. Yes. And she agreed. She said that's fine. You know, that fixes a lot of the problem. So I've been very lucky that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, Lynn.
I'm piggybacking on Vanessa. Did you have your editors say, "We don't get what's going on here. Can you explain it to us before they began editing it?" Because you have to know that every class we had, we all started with, "We don't get it," and then as we
I didn't
started-
say that.
No, you didn't say that. Or this was so hard. No. Because we had the most fabulous discussions on it, and we dug and we tore it apart, and we ultimately got to what we thought was what you were trying to say. But I was thinking all the time, I wonder what the editors are thinking about this, and do they discuss among themselves what they think it means and then go to it and editing it? Did they ever discuss their process with you?
No, actually, they have not. I have very little insight into how Ellen or Terry or Ruoshi, any of the other editors, do their work. Except I have an immense respect for the way they do it, because I grade papers and I work with other people's fiction as a professor, and that's
Right.
different. That's a different role. With an editor, when you're an
Right.
editor, you have to be working on not correcting, but sort of helping the author really refine their work. And it's so, some editors have a heavier hand, some have a lighter hand. And as I said, I've just been very lucky with my editors. I really think the world of them.
Yeah. I think they did a good job. Karen.
My question is more about how these books made me feel and how I think we all felt. We would come in every week and say, "Oh, I hated this story." And then we would say, and I think what we were touching upon was the vulnerability that you captured and that you led us to feel as individuals, that we felt a piece of that vulnerability, and that you were honest and raw in some of these feelings. These characters went through very hard times. And so I think, and we all left at the end of that 1 hour period saying, "She's a great writer." Look what we got. And we left feeling a transformation after having the opportunity to speak about the story for an hour. And so, first of all, kudos to you. What a feat. I mean, you brought us through this transformation.
Yes, you
My
did.
second question is, I noticed that many of these stories had shards of glass. And can you talk a little bit about how you used the glass as a metaphor, and what was that
Sure.
all about?
That's interesting. Well, first of all, thank you. I just want to say that is a lovely, lovely thing to hear as a writer. And I'm also even more delighted to think about the stories bringing people together to discuss them. That's, to me, as important, if not more important, than the idea of somebody reading them. That the idea that they're bringing you together and you're finding meaning together. I mean, that's so moving to me. I can't even express it. Shards of glass. That's interesting. You're right. You're absolutely right. This is the problem with being the writer. You don't always know what you're doing. But yes, that's right. I get sometimes captivated with certain images. And for a while it was shattering glass. There's something that's dangerous about it, but it's also broken. So it's as you say, vulnerable. Glass is vulnerable. It's delicate, but then once it's broken, it's very dangerous. And I think that combination of delicacy and danger,
I think that's her.
yeah, it really appeals to me. There's actually a pane of shattered glass in the doorway to my apartment that the landlord has not fixed for weeks now. And every time my daughter runs through it and just lets the door slam behind her, I'm holding my breath because I'm terrified the glass will just spring out all over her. So I think I'm often attracted to things that frighten me. And that's been true since I was very little, when I dressed up as the Wicked Witch of the West for like 2 or 3 Halloweens in a row, because she terrified me. But also I couldn't stay away from her. And I think that that comes through with the breaking glass, the shattering glass. It comes through with, I think I do a lot with fire and flames and burning. I find fire terrifying.
And rats.
And
Rats.
Terrifying.
Abby, who just came on, said that, she has a thing about rats, and she was reading it. Well, where are you, Abby? You can, if you want to, where is she? Abby, go ahead. Tell us about when you read it in the middle of the night.
Oh, no, my thing was more with the birds. Anything
The
like
birds.
it. Yes, and I just really have to switch and do something else and have a conversation with myself, saying, "Wait a second, this is written. It's not around me."
It's not real. Yeah.
Right. Lynn.
I was fascinated with your images, and even though you may not be aware of it, I saw a lot of shedding of skin, shedding of snake skin, and to answer Judy, I used to think initially it was a very dark book. Until I realized that I found that you were playing with those images of our dark side and our good side in many of the people that we read about, and that there was this ability to transform yourself, which I found very hopeful. So I tend to want to have, I think we all want to have some hope in this day and age. And I think when I was going to ask that question, Judy, do you think these are pessimistic stories or hopeful stories? I think they start pretty dark. But I see the light at was that a deliberate thing for you to want to end hopefully, or did that just happen like that?
I think that you're right about the snake skin. I think of it as a birth metaphor, and I always find I locate a lot of joy and hope in birth and babies and small children. I've always spent a lot of time when I was in graduate school. I nannied and babysat to make ends meet, and then I helped parent my godchildren, and I'm raising my daughter now. And I find a lot of hope and joy in being with children. I mean, I think that's why so many of the stories have babies or children show up in them. That is how I put hope in my stories as well as in my life, I think. And so at the end, Among the Thorns ends, well, I'll talk about that later, ends with her and the baby. Burning Girls, which Deborah and her partner Ruth show up again in Blackjack briefly. And they've raised Shayna's daughter, and I guess that's for me where the hope comes in. That's for me where the positive look toward the future comes in.
I have a question for you. How do you navigate the responsibility of writing about historical atrocities? And as soon I saw Burning Girls, and I didn't think about it. And of course, there was the Triangle Fire, which we all know about, pogroms through a fantastic lens. Are there things that the supernatural can do that realism can't?
I take that responsibility very, very, very seriously. And for me, the most important part is to never attribute to supernatural influence what's actually the responsibility of human evil. So that in Burning Girls, it is not the Lilith who causes the fire at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. She gets Shayna the job there. It's implied that that's why it's been so easy for Shayna to get the job. But the fire was, of course, caused by human irresponsibility and greed and exploitation. And it's really important to me to mark that line, that I don't want to exonerate anyone, any human, any suffering caused by humans in my stories. That to me it just doesn't communicate what I want to communicate. And I think it's fundamentally irresponsible to the people who are suffering and who are suffering. I do think the supernatural, that fantasy can convey what realism can't, and that it can convey what it feels like to live. Realism can convey, I mean, to a certain extent, all literature, and I'm sure, Lynn, you were the English teacher, yes, would agree with me, that all literature is fantastic in that it imposes a narrative coherence on life. And life generally doesn't have a narrative coherence, right? We have a beginning, we're born, we have an end, we die, or perhaps not, if you depending on your beliefs. But there's not a sort of steady narrative arc. So to the extent that realism imposes that kind of narrative arc on what it feels is realistic literature, that's also a fantasy. But for me, I work with speculative fiction because life doesn't feel pedestrian to me. When you experience highs and lows, or even everyday struggles, they feel immense. They feel immense. They feel powerful. You feel like your love for somebody could move mountains. You feel like the pain you're suffering will stay in the walls of the house you're in because it's so powerful. And I want to capture the truth of that experience rather than capture the reality of what's happening from an outside perspective, if that makes sense.
It makes so much sense. Merle, then Judy. Merle?
I have a question about the story Swimming, which was one of the shorter stories, but a very powerful story. And it seemed to be a commentary on marriage. And we weren't exactly sure what your feeling was at the end, that the girl was going to survive this difficult marriage, difficult in-laws. Was it a commentary on marriage in that way, that people just survive it even if it's bad?
It actually grew out of my cousin's marriage. My cousin said to me right before she got engaged, "I love Chris. I'm going to marry him. His parents are crazy. They're building a house. They've always been building a house and they're crazy, but I love him and I'm going to marry him." And I thought, great, perfect. Here we go. And the funny thing is, his parents have read the story and they told him that I understand what it means to build a house better than anybody else they know. They understand what it means to be involved in that project, which was huge for me because I was like, are they going to read it and be upset with me? To me, that story is one about love overcoming constructed difficulties, I guess you could say. That there's this house which threatens to absorb them. And she doesn't know if she'll just become put into the wall of dolls or end up one of the sort of nasty Valkyries. Just become part of the house. She's worried. The parents tried to make Adam part of the house, but in the end, she's able to destroy the house, metaphorically or literally, depending on how you read the story, and be with Adam, and they're able to be together. And so, for me, that was actually a hopeful story about love triumphing.
Thank you so much, because we did kind of interpret it that way at the end, but we weren't sure. So but thank you. Very helpful.
Are they done with the house?
Oh, you don't even want to know.
That makes that story so much better. Okay. So another question. Oh, Judy, sorry.
I'll speak for myself. At our age, I think we look at stories slightly differently because of experience. And in this class, we have the ability to talk about our histories and bring that to it. It was the first time I had ever read a nursery rhyme not as a nursery rhyme. Mm-hmm. And so I was fascinated by what you have done in showing us it's important to look back at nursery rhymes. And I had never recognized that necessity to do that. I think I'm looking back now at a lot of things, and I readjust how I think about them, and I think your book helped me do that.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Do you teach fairy tales? And what do you have the students read? And I hate to glob on here, but have you read like The Golem and the Ginny by Helene Wecker, Sisters of the Winter Wood by Rena Rossner, which both of those books I happen to like, and they're magical realism, right, Lynn? Magical realism.
Well, it's funny you should ask. I just taught a course last semester on contemporary Jewish fantasy. And I taught Golem and the
Take
Ginny.
that course.
I don't think I taught Rena Rossiter, but I have read her on my own time, of course.
Yeah.
I don't have the syllabus in front of me, but I can send it to you later if you're
Yes,
interested.
please.
And it
So
included-
interested.
It included some YA and some children's literature on it as well, because I found some of that very interesting. There's a great book by Sasha Lamb called When the Angels Left the Old Country. I don't know if you've read it, but I thought it was beautiful. Just brought tears to my eyes at the end.
All right.
So it was not a highly enrolled class, but we were really but that meant we were able to really get into the meat of the texts there. I also teach I've just finished this semester teaching my course on my mid-level course on fairy tales, which is sort of structured narratologically, where we pick we start with Beauty and the Beast and we track its development through the centuries. We then go to Bluebeard, we track its development, including contemporary literary revisions of the stories. And then this year I tried something new where I had 2 weeks at the end of the semester where we looked at anti-Black racism and anti-Semitism in classic fairy tales and responses to them.
Wow.
And that went very well.
That would be a great class.
Oh,
Super great class.
Thank you.
That class.
I hope my students felt the same way.
We're sure they did. Lynn.
So I tried to explain magical realism before we started your book, and I don't think I did a very good job. So I'd like you to help us all. What I said, you can correct me. I told them that authors often can't say what they really want to say about an experience, and the only way to say it is through a magical realism. It's an image that would help them convey to the reader more than they could convey to the reader in their own in a realistic fashion. Also, that life isn't linear, and so books. Narratives aren't linear, so maybe magic realism helps with that kind of thing. But help us understand the use of magical realism and why authors feel the need to use that technique.
Oh, if only I could. I guess I've never been too clear on what separates magical realism from fantasy myself. So I don't know that I will be the most helpful guide.
Okay.
I do know that there's a lot of scholarship on this, that there's especially a lot of scholarship around Latin American magic realism.
Yeah.
And that different theories there have been advanced that have to do with post-colonialism and sort of the attempt to make a narrative in a colonial language, but to make it describe an anti-colonial reality. But I'm obviously in a different context, as are some of my favorite writers like Angela Carter or Kelly Link. I feel like formally it's about, there's two things that are important to magic realism. One is that it's about a real world that is already magic. It doesn't transport you to a secondary world like Oz. It usually doesn't involve a sort of epic fantasy quest. It's about everyday life in a world that is already infused with magic. And that the characters usually the characters in this story do not understand the magic as something outrageous or unusual.
Right.
And in that way, it's like a fairy tale. And in a fairy tale, we call it the banality of the marvelous, right? That if you're in a fairy tale, if a cow says to you in a fairy tale, be careful, your sister is waiting around the corner with a knife to kill you, you don't say, my God, a talking cow. How did this happen? I've got to tell everybody I know. You say, my sister, really, thank you so much. I will do you a favor someday. And I think that
We should ask her what book she would recommend.
that same kind of acceptance of the marvelous as part of the everyday is important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Several of your protagonists make choices the reader can't fully endorse. Mm-hmm. How much do you want readers to sympathize versus be unsettled?
That's an interesting question. I guess what I want is for readers to understand how they came to make those choices, whether they sympathize or not. whether they're unsettled or not. I want them to understand the path the protagonist walked to get there. And I'm thinking specifically about rats and how that protagonist makes a number of choices that are simply terrible. And does so because she's operating from a place of intense pain and suffering that's invisible to the people around her for the most part. And yeah, I could not countenance many of the choices she makes, but I'm fortunate not to have been in that position of intense suffering either. And I'm very grateful for that. So I think I'm looking for understanding.
Okay, perfect. Did Burning Girls come first, or did the collection assemble itself around a theme you only recognize later?
Oh, the second, definitely.
Okay.
No question. I wrote Burning Girls probably midway through most of these stories.
Oh.
And
So how did you pick that as the title? Or did the editor?
Of the story or the book?
The book.
Well, that's a sort of pretty easy nuts and bolts question, which is that Burning Girls, when it came out as a story, had been very successful. It was nominated for most of the major fantasy awards. It won one award, and it got a lot of attention. And so it was clear to me that if any of my stories were going to be recognizable to somebody who might be interested in the book, it would be that one.
Judy.
Were you involved in the cover art?
I was not, but isn't it wonderful? Isn't it?
Yeah,
wonderful?
it is.
Yes.
It really is wonderful.
It's so wonderful.
I was in publishing, and I will tell you, finding the right image for the cover is super critical.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to know if you were involved at all.
I do not have any skills at all as a visual artist, but it was Irene Gallo who for a long time ran Tor.com, the imprint that put out the book. And she came up through publishing in production and design. And she knew many, many, many wonderful illustrators. And they did art for Burning Girls. This was the art they did for the story Burning Girls. They also did art for Ballroom Blitz and for Among the Thorns. I actually think their piece for Among the Thorns is mind-blowingly good. And in fact, was exactly what I had envisioned when I was writing the story, but I didn't say anything because I don't know anything about visual art. And somehow they managed to understand that anyway. If I can find, I have it in a frame and a picture somewhere, but if I can find it online, I'll email it to Vanessa.
I'm looking for it now.
Vanessa.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I got it.
I think all three pieces were done by the Balbuso twins.
The clothing she has on, the thread that she's got going, besides the burning, it's so critical to the stories and the time. I loved it. I thought it was great.
Is this the picture you're talking about?
Yes, that's the one.
Oh my!
Oh, wow.
Oh, I love that piece.
It's a beautiful piece.
There is an artist who exhibits at the Highland Park Art Festival who paints very similar to this.
Oh,
She's there every year. It's a young woman and she exhibits on First Street.
You know, I think I bought one of her paintings.
What
do a lot of women.
What were the other stories that had pictures with them?
I think just those three.
So Among the Thorns, Burning
Girls, and Ballroom Blitz.
Oh, Ballroom.
Let's see the Ballroom Blitz.
Okay. Let me look.
We had a lot of fun with Ballroom Blitz.
So did I.
Lynn.
Tell us, if you wish, which of these stories best exemplifies you?
Oh my goodness. Oh, let me look at the table of contents.
Okay, you mentioned that you use many of your experiences or your feelings in these stories.
I guess the character I identify the most with would be Deborah in Burning Girls, although there's a lot of me in Ida and Among the Thorns as well, although I think she is stronger than I am.
Is this the Ballroom Blitz picture?
Yes, it is.
I love that.
It's gorgeous.
Isn't it? They're amazing, those artists. Just amazing.
Amazing. Really amazing. Merle.
Okay, speaking of Ballroom Blitz, that was my next question. The story had so many positive images of people loving music and dancing and how music kind of saves them at the end, even. But my question was the other part about alcoholism. Do you have any thoughts about alcoholism in our culture? How negative it could be, or is it something we can never get rid of? What is your opinion about alcoholism in our culture?
I have a lot of strong feelings about that. I have lost a friend over that. I think the story is about my ambivalence about the bar culture I was in as a young woman and how much I loved the music, but how self-destructive it was, the overall culture. And I think that's true. I mean, and it's hard for me to separate the joy I sometimes experienced in that culture with the self-destructive aspects. And I don't think, I mean, we tried banning alcohol in this country and it was a disaster. I don't think prohibition, I don't think it's been good for any of the mind altering substances that we use it for, that we have tried to apply it to. But I do think that, and I don't object to people having an occasional drink with friends or smoking the occasional joint with friends or anything like that. But I do think you're absolutely right. Like there are serious destructive and self-destructive aspects to it. And it's really important to keep a good, strong handle on how it is we're using substances like that, because they can turn negative and sometimes they do it in a way that you don't notice it's happening.
Your students are in the throe of, going to bars, getting high, whatever. Do they ever comment on that or?
CUNY students, because it's a public city university, there's sort of a different group than many conventionally aged college students. So I have a number of students who are not traditional students who are coming back after having not gone to college for a year or two or 3 or 4 or 20. And even the students who started college at 18, they often take longer because CUNY students are often working full time, maybe only 20 hours, but I do have many students who work full time. They have family responsibilities. They're taking care of children or elderly relatives. And so I'm not saying that they don't go out and do those things, but I think it's less
Yeah.
it's less all encompassing than at some
Yeah.
other schools.
Yeah. But now that I think about it, you're right. It's not like they're on a campus or whatever.
Exactly.
Alice and then Lynn. Wait, Alice.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Okay,
It's okay.
I'm
It's
sorry.
okay.
Okay. I'm curious, most people have grown up with these fairy tales in various ways, but not everybody is Jewish, so everybody hasn't grown up with all the Jewish references. I'm just curious how your students who are Jewish, and also I have to say yes to some of the references I was with, it seems to me that I enjoyed that, but that the Jewish references were maybe not as accessible to everybody as the fairy tale references.
So you're going in and out, Alice, but you want to know, is it accessible to non-Jews? And I'm going to tack on to that, your Jewish fairy tale class. Were there there must have been non-Jews in the class.
There was only one Jewish student in the class. He and I were both very surprised that the other students were all Gentile. And so that meant we had to do a lot of backtracking because young Gentile students today, and this is a good thing, I think, they don't know what the blood libel is. And how wonderful, right? How many of my ancestors would have given anything to live in a society where young people didn't know off the top of their heads what that was.
Right. And listen, young Jewish people probably don't know that either.
Well, you're right.
Let's be honest.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But so I think that I don't teach my own stories, I should say, in my fairy tale classes. I would feel a little too self-conscious and self-aggrandizing to do that. But I do purposefully put those references in there. And I'll tell you why. When I was writing in college, I was in a writing seminar, a creative writing seminar, and I was writing a sort of semi-autographical piece about a Jewish family, a mother and her two daughters. And I referred to tchotchkes on the shelf. And everybody in the class said, we don't know what that means. You just have to call it bric-a-brac. And I thought,
That's so funny.
yeah, I thought but this family wouldn't call it bric-a-brac. I wouldn't call it bric-a-brac.
Right,
That's some New England WASP stuff.
Right. No one in here has bric-a-brac. We all have
We all have
tchotchkes.
tchotchkes.
And everyone, well,
Yeah. And I then didn't write explicitly Jewish characters for maybe 10 or 15 years after that. Because I felt like I'd been sort of silenced, sounds like too heavy a word,
Yes.
but I felt like I'd been sort of told not to do that.
Yes.
And I think it's important for Jews as well as for all other marginalized peoples to be able to trust that they will have a reader who, if they don't know the reference, especially nowadays, can just look it up, right?
Yeah.
Or ask
Yes.
somebody, or try to glean it from context. The way I can quote the King James Bible from context because I've just read so many quotations because I read things, and you have to pick up the references and the allusions and the quotations just if you're going to be well read. And I feel it's not unfair to expect other people to do the same. And so I'm hoping they certainly won't get every reference or Yiddish word, but I hope to provide enough context that they can go on with the reading nonetheless.
Oh, thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you so much.
especially with electronic readers. You just press it, it comes right up. I'm sure a lot of your students are reading that way. Lynn.
All right, I want to say something about what you were saying, and then I'm going to come back to what I wanted to ask you. I find a lot of non-Jewish students using Yiddish phrases. I mean, I think they are like they'll say I had to schlep my bags, or this tchotchke, or whatever it is. So I think it's broadening rather than limiting.
I think it's a post-Seinfeld world.
Well, that could be, yes. All right. Tell me if it's my imagination, but in the scene where the mannequins come pouring down, do you remember what
In
story
swimming?
was it? Okay.
Yes, it was in swimming.
Wasn't it?
I got this, and I saw this in other stories, but don't ask me where.
Okay.
I found an anti-capitalistic theme going on.
Mhm. That is not
my
your imagination. That is
It is.
absolutely right. I was raised by leftists. My father is a Marxist. That's just part of the way I see the world. So that is definitely in there. And sometimes I just drop the mask entirely, like in Emma Goldman, and let loose with it. So
Well, I thought that mannequin scene was brilliant. I love that image, and I thought, okay, that's my imagination. She's going anti-capitalist, but no.
No,
So
it is
you
not
are-
your imagination.
Okay, thank you.
It makes so much sense.
Okay.
Is there a story in this collection that surprised you? That went somewhere you didn't expect when you started it?
Yes. And it's a story I'm still ambivalent about, actually. It's Among the Thorns. And I'm ambivalent about it in a couple of ways, right? One is that nobody outside of fairy tale scholars and aficionados has heard of the Jew in the thorn bush. So I'm ambivalent about the fact that I wrote this story that requires that I retell that story in order for this story to make sense.
Oh.
And I'm also ambivalent about the way I ended it. I end it with her taking the baby. It opens with blood libel and ends with her taking the baby. And I feel like I wrote myself into a corner there where I couldn't let her leave the baby.
Yeah, no.
But then so she had to take the baby. But then what? So I go back and forth. I'm ambivalent about how I did that. I've been told by other fairy tale people, other fairy tale scholars, that they don't think that they think I did a fine job with handling bringing the story back while also pushing back against it. But I'm still ambivalent about the ending, and I did not expect. I didn't start out with that ending in mind. I expected her to just walk away. I did not. I didn't fully understand what I was doing by bringing a baby into the picture. when I did. I didn't really understand the corner I was painting myself into.
That makes sense.
We need to read that again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to go back and look at a lot of these. So now I have two questions for you. What are you reading right now?
Okay. I'm actually reading because I read a lot of nonfiction, and right now I'm reading a book about the history of the she-wolf as the symbol of Rome. I know that sounds so random, right? But it was
Wow. Yes.
just a book I happen to be in the middle of. So that's
Very
what I'm reading
niche,
right now.
a niche book. Yes. Yes.
It's just called She-Wolf. And
Okay.
it's slow going. It's very dense, but I find it very interesting. I love to, you can tell because I'm a fairy tale person. I love to see how the same symbol or the same story, the meaning changes over the years.
Yeah.
So it sort of appeals to that part of me.
Any fiction that you're reading?
Oh my goodness, so much fiction that I love and so much fiction I haven't gotten to read. I read a great book called When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill last summer, which was amazing. It sort of takes as its premise that in the mid-50s, a lot of American women, hundreds of American women, just transformed into dragons and flew away. And,
Wow.
and sort of it uses that to talk about patriarchy and women's roles and how women have to get along in our society. And it's a great book. Yes, that's the one. And of course, I'm trying to think. You know how it is when somebody asks you what you're reading and your mind goes blank.
It happens to me all the time.
Yes, like I know I've read other things I really love, and I can't bring any of them to mind right now.
And of course, and I told you this before, I would be remiss if I didn't say, what are you working on now?
I am working on now my second scholarly book. So I'm working on an academic book, and it's about Jewish representation in the English language fairy tale tradition. And so it starts by looking at mainstream fairy tale editors and Disney, and looks at the role Jews have played in those stories. And then it looks at the responses from Jewish editors and fairy tale writers and it encompasses about the past 150 years or so. And I plan to get it done by the end of this summer. I'm very excited about that.
Well, now that you told us, you'll have to do it.
Right, I'm holding to it.
Would you, is there another fiction book in your future?
Yes, definitely. After that one is done, I'm going to focus on my fiction alone for just a few years and put the research on the back burner. And I've been keeping track of my short story ideas as over the past year when I've been focusing on this book, and I will definitely be getting back to fiction. Sorry.
Yeah, it'll be a short story book then.
I think so. Yeah, I've tried novels, and I don't know. I feel like I have room for book-sized academic work in my head, but somehow for fiction, I just can't. It's short. So you can do so many interesting, like pyrotechnics with the language if you don't have to sustain it over an entire novel. And I like doing those kinds of tricks in stories.
Here. I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
Oh, I said I really want to work with the concept of wayward children in Jewish lore. The children who are half human and half shadim and sort of belong no place. Yeah.
Woo. Evie.
Yeah, I'm not sure really how to phrase this, and it came to my mind just before your last answer, which I think also spurred the question a little bit more. When you are actually reading something, both you and the general, we, whatever, do you read it with the idea of possibly of fairy tale being with a mind view of this is a fairy tale right on, or do you glean that as you're continuing to read it?
I'm sorry, I missed the middle part of that. Do I read it with the idea that
with a fairy tale mentality, think it as a fairy tale? And I guess the question came to my mind is even something like either from a therapeutic stand of looking at something as perhaps a fairy tale, even New Testament.
She's cutting out.
Yeah,
maybe as a fairy tale is another way of understanding it.
Do you, Roberta? I see you, and we'll get to you in a hot minute. I think Evie is asking: do you write it as a fairy tale or a therapeutic from a therapeutic viewpoint?
from the beginning, from the get-go, or do you maybe once you get into the story realize, oh no, this is not a fairy tale? I mean, where do you make that transition, or do you know it going in?
Oh, I almost always know it going in. And part of it is that I'm so immersed in fairy tales professionally that I'm almost always thinking about fairy tales. Like the leftism, it's always there in my brain.
Okay. Roberta, go ahead.
It makes sense.
I I loved your book, and although I did not understand all the stories, my question to you is: when I read it, they were very. I was in the moment within that chapter, and I didn't try to connect all the stories. I took them as very individual statements. Is it your intention for a reader to connect them in some way, purposefully and intentionally, or just to read them as individual?
Individual stories.
Right.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
But real meaningful.
Yeah.
I think that for me, I wrote them as individual pieces, and that it was only afterward that I saw certain themes begin to emerge among them. And so I don't feel strong. I feel like as a reader, you should take what speaks to you, and leave the rest. And so if they speak to you individually, that's fine. And if afterward you notice themes that connect them, that's also great. I don't have a strong feeling about that.
Okay. All right, Lynn, last question. I have a hard stop at 11, as should Veronica. Lynn, go ahead.
Okay. Contrary to what Roberta just said, I saw a central theme throughout the story. I saw you or your narrator on a journey, because I taught a lot of journey books. So I sort of placed that upon your narrative. A journey with religious intent. In other words, a person who was trying to get a sense of belonging somewhere, some idea of identity, and that it was following through, and there was an evolution in that character. Did that come to you at all, or am I finding that a fantasy?
I think it did not come to me, but it is not necessarily a fantasy either. As a fellow English teacher, I strongly believe that if it's in the text, it's there, whether I knew it was there when I wrote it or not.
Okay.
So much of art, at least for me, so much of writing happens at the subconscious level. And so much of meaning making does too, that I may not have known it was in there, and that doesn't mean it's not in there.
Okay.
Okay. If you hold up your book, Veronica, because I'm going to take a quick screenshot here. Yay! I should hold up mine too.
I want to see your whole face.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, wait, all right. Lynn is right, as always. There we go. Okay. We can't thank you enough. What a delightful morning.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I would love to have you as a teacher.
Yeah, I would. So I'm gonna send you a thank you note and the YouTube link to this, but please send us the syllabus. I'm super interested in what you're reading, and just what a great morning. So thank you for taking time with us.
My pleasure. It really was.
I'm going to tell everyone, this helps Veronica if you go on Amazon, Goodreads, and give her a good review.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm
and
doing
thank
that.
you for having me. This has really been delightful.
Yay! Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much.